Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're very welcome to this session on government Reimagined. My name is Derrick McCourt. I run Microsoft's UK public sector business. I'm joined today by a panelist of esteemed experts, as they've described themselves to me. If I introduce my left to right, first of all, we have Mark O'Neill, who's Head of Innovation and Delivery at GDS. And next we have Geoff Connell, who's the CIO for the London Boroughs of Newham and Havering. And last, and certainly not least, Ed Schofield, who's the Information and Technology Director for the Rural Payments Agency. I guess today we've got a panel of experts who are going to talk a little bit about some of the transformation that is going on in their organization. The real purpose of this session is to make it as interactive as possible, to answer your questions, as many of you set out or maybe on the journey already to similar transformation in your organization. Certainly, as you know, last week's spending review hit us all. It's very clear that the world is not getting any easier for service delivery within government. Less money available. Certainly, the demands on services certainly don't seem to be decreasing in any way. So, what I'd like to kick off with is to give each panelist an opportunity to share some of their experiences of managing the revolutionary change that's going on in their organization. So I'll ask each of them just to take maybe 5 minutes just to introduce themselves, their organization, and the work that's been going on. So maybe kick off first with Ed to talk about the work going on at RPA.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Ed Schofield. I'm the Information and Technology Director at the Rural Payments Agency. If you don't know what we do, we're part of DEFRA. We basically administer the EU payments for the Common Agricultural Policy. We basically pay £3.2 billion worth of money to all our farming community for the land they own and how they use that land to produce crops and the farming. So we actually put a lot of money from the EU into the rural economy. It's not all we do. We also run the British Cattle Movement Service. Now, you might not know this, but every cow has a passport. So we know when it's born, when it moves from farm to farm, and when it unfortunately ends its life as well. So we administer and track all the cattle in the UK. Currently, we have 55% digital take-up on our single payment scheme for the EU policy. We also have 95% digital take-up for cattle movements. So all the farmers, when they do move the cows around, go online and re-register them. So we've been on a big journey over the last few years. The Rural Payment Agency possibly had the best IT systems in the world. We came in for a lot of criticism. And if we don't implement the controls from the EU, we have a thing called disallowance that costs the UK taxpayer a lot of money. And what we've been working with is improving our processes, improving the IT, because our IT is very antiquated. And what we've been looking at is working out how we can move forward and work with our customers. So we've done this by, and we'll come on to some of the questions and answers later, by implementing, well, first of all, developing a plan. What are we going to do? Split it up into a 3-year plan and also a 5-year plan, breaking it up into manageable chunks, working with the business to understand how we can do that. We had 45 different projects within our strategic improvement plan, and we've been and actually implemented those changes. To do that, we've had to go through a big organisational redesign. A lot of our organisation was working in silos. So you had one part of the business, they had an IT function, they had a finance function, they had a procurement function, and they had inspectors. And we've consolidated all those functions down, put in the right controls to stop everyone going off willy-nilly, but still giving them enough ability to be flexible within their business, and implemented change through having control and governance in place, but also restructuring. We've spent a lot of time talking with our stakeholders and customers. We have a very, very diverse base of customers across the UK. Some of our customers don't even know what a computer is. They're farmers, they want to operate, but then we have the big global multinationals that also access our system. So we have a lot of people that can't access the internet, And we also have a big community that won't, and that's some of our challenges that we need to address. And then the final area really is around technology enablement. It's not about technology, this is about providing enabling technology so that we can achieve our business outcomes and meet the needs of not just the UK PLC, our customers, but we can't underestimate the control and compliance regimes that we have to apply for the EU as well. So it's quite a diverse environment.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Maybe ask Mark to talk a little bit about the work that's going on at GDS.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Mark Connell, and I'm from the Government Digital Service. GDS was set up about 2 years ago, and we were set up to help drive the shift of public services to be digital by default. Essentially, our remit is to help organisations across the public sector shift service delivery to where the people are. Where are people? They're online. What do people expect? People expect the kind of quality of service which they get from other online service providers. So our challenge in the public sector is to change our business model, change our operating model, change our service model, and change our technology model to be digital by default. So it's only a small challenge, very easy to achieve. I'm slightly disappointed we haven't completed it all by now. GDS, we're a small organisation by government standards. There's only about 150 of us. So the way we work is we work in partnership with departments and agencies and organisations across the public sector to help them achieve their business goals. The fundamental approach which we take is to start from user need, drive it from user need. So, as Ed said, quite often we have very complex sets of user needs, we have very complex sets of user communities, we have very complex sets of challenges around how we tackle, how we support, how we engage, how we deliver into those user communities. So what we've been doing is we've been looking at how we can support that process. So we started with what didn't feel like it, but was perhaps the kind of most straightforward bit, which was to simplify the way in which services are delivered in terms of user experience by shifting to a single place. So GovUK becomes a single place and has become a single place where people go to for government services. The next bit is actually transactional services and the challenges around those. So the approach we're taking is we've identified 25 core services, and these are services which we haven't just kind of picked at random. These are services which we've worked with departments and organisations like RPA, Office of Public Guardian and others to identify as being opportunities for service transformation and business transformation. And the reason why this is so important is because the lessons we learn, the experience we gain, the opportunities which we develop, the patterns which we build and create coming out of these exemplars are things which we are looking to share right across the public sector to help drive that transformation more generally. So in terms of where we are, this is definitely interesting times in every sense of that expression. But I think what's clear to me, looking at things from the centre, is that there is a huge willingness, there's a huge opportunity, there's a huge prize out there if we get this right, not just in terms of the prize for ourselves in our organisations, but in terms of user experience. Alongside that, there are huge challenges. You know, so Ed touched on technology, there is culture, there is capability, there is our own world where at times we kind of revert to process rather than focusing on delivery, and those are part of the challenges which we face. But obviously, by the time we finish this morning's presentation, we'll have resolved all those challenges, and everyone in this room will be able to go back to their organisations and transform.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Mark. Maybe hand over to Geoff to talk about the work that he's been doing at Newham and Havering.
Hi, my name's Geoff Connell, and I head up the ICT services at the London Boroughs of Newham and Havering. And if you don't know where they are, Newham is where the 2012 Olympics was largely held, in Stratford, and Havering is, Romford is the main town there. So these are two different boroughs that are not geographically next to each other, and they are very, very different politically. We've got a red one and a blue one. But the interesting thing that I've found from this experience is that if the technology is right, it can actually provide for the requirements of both those different organisations very effectively. My role has really been twofold. One is to reduce the cost of the provision of the technology, because the funding challenges that we've got mean that everything has to be cheaper. But I think much more the interesting role is to change the council's target operating model, to shift the transactions online. And we've had 3 boroughs, Newham, Havering and Waltham Forest, all working together on developing a consistent technology stack to support customer services transactions, and particularly taking them online. Newham's now got around 50% of all its transactions online, self-service, and this is in one of the poorest boroughs in the country, incredibly culturally diverse, and we managed to do it there. And we're using those same technologies to work across the different organisations. And interestingly, that means a consistent user interface for residents as well. So the websites are exactly the same, they've just got different logos on them and different content, but it's the same technology. So that channel shift activity saved around 10 to 11 million pounds per annum in Newham alone, and it is now the new operating system. So we had a recent change to a policy, and we brought in a landlord licensing local tax rule, which is quite an interesting one. But rather than doing it in the ways we might have done in the past, it's digital by default. It's online self-service, brought in £4 million of new income through an online-only transaction, which is helping to improve the quality of private sector rented accommodation in the borough. So that's been an interesting challenge and fun to be involved in. The shared services itself, actually, I've really enjoyed, and it's been interesting to see how much cost we can take out of service provision, and we're up to around 20%, so 3 million per annum we've taken from the costs. But also we've taken out some of the capital that was required because we didn't need to reinvent the wheel. And you know, I've personally enjoyed that journey of getting two organisations to take the best from each other. So not only are we cheaper, it's a much better quality service. And so going back to my role with the technology, part of it is to enable further and wider shared services. So we've now got 6 London boroughs going live in November. Havering's already live, it was the first, but there'll be 6 in November with a shared ERP solution. So a single chart of accounts, the same processes, and that's really paving the way for further shared services. Newham will join that and become the 7th in April. And if you can share the technology and you can share the processes that are embedded in the technology, well, actually you can share the people. And that's the journey that I'm helping to take the organisation on.
Excellent, thanks Geoff. I mean, I guess if I was picking out a common theme across everything that you've said, it's the change in the business model or the operating model of the organisation that's had to go on. You know, it's not just been a case of landing technology. And I guess in driving that transformation, I'm wondering, has that been, you know, a top-down approach? Have you had the leadership support in your organisation? How have you managed to embed that transformation in the culture of the organisation?
It's difficult. It's not an easy thing to do, and it has been a top-down drive of the journey that we've been in, and it is hard to keep everyone engaged at different levels. You know, how does it? You have to always turn around and look at it from what does it mean to me as a person, and I think that's half of the learning that we've went through as an executive team at the agency, of understanding how to communicate so everyone understands why we're doing the changes and how it's going to improve their day-to-day life from an agency perspective. But also it is that stakeholder engagement that I talked about earlier around communicating with our customers. We talk to over 1,000 customers per month to understand what they need from our service as well. So we had to then communicate back to them why we're making these changes, because some of them would be not enabling them to do things better. We might be changing it to actually make things a little bit harder, but the service that we provided was actually better to them in the end. And you know, we always say communicate. But that is one of the drivers, even if you have nothing to communicate from week in, week out, just so you let people know where we're starting off, have a plan. As we said, we had this 5-year plan. It was clearly drawn out, articulated, everyone was communicated to, and helped formulate that plan as well. So they felt that they had some engagement with what we were trying to achieve. And you miss things along the line, and you have to be honest when you've got things wrong. You can try things, and when we talk to GDS around the agile approach, it's okay to do things wrong occasionally. We can, as long as we try it and deliver a service better, we can then backtrack and say, actually, we tried that, didn't work quite so well, but we evolved the way that our business operates. But that has been through communicate.
And Geoff, in your circumstance, you talked about 7 organisations all moving in the one direction. How have you have you got the leadership support of different political organisations, different leaders in those organisations to all move in the same direction?
Well, as you just heard, it's the what's in it for me, isn't it? You've got to sell everybody the individual benefits, and that was quite a slow gestation period to get everybody to agree that they could all work in the same way to achieve those savings. So that one was quite difficult because everybody was at the same level, so it is very much selling the benefits. I think the difference with the channel shift activity in Newham, which was incredibly successful, was because we had a solid business case with solid metrics. We're able to get the politicians to be able to make decisions about deciding specific transactions would be online only. And that's quite a brave thing to do. But also fitted in with their policy. They wanted people to be less dependent upon the state and more independent, and putting these transactions online, enabling people to use them as one of the ways of doing it. So that was absolutely top down, but informed by good quality metrics. What are the face-to-face transactions that cost us money? How do we shift those into high quality online transactions that people will use? And critically, how do we remove the old channels or throttle them back at the same time? Because as we see from DVLA in some areas like that, it's a fantastic online transaction, but if the traditional channel is still there, people may choose to use it. So you've got to bring these things together.
And I guess Mark, within your role and the role of GDS, how do you support organisations to identify the right internal parts of the organisation, the processes that can be transformed? You talked about the exemplar project. So if somebody's looking to turn something into an exemplar in their organisation, how can you guys support on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting challenge because you need a number of things need to come together. Really, you need that top-down leadership. You need that vision. You need a clear business model, a clear reason as to why you're doing it. The WIFM. As Geoff said, why are we doing this? What's in it for me? You also need to have a compelling user need. What is the user need which we're trying to address here? And you also need to have that willingness to embark on a different approach, a different model, because, as Ed said, the thing about agile delivery is that agile delivery challenges quite a lot of the thinking which people have been brought up with. We're used to very long, very big projects where all the risk is shifted to the far right of the project. Now with agile, risk is something which we have to manage and maintain on a kind of real-time basis. And that's a big shift, that's a big challenge. So we've been lucky with the exemplars. We've been lucky to be able to work with people who are making that transition, who are willing to make those changes, who are willing to embark on that journey. And as I said, we aim through the exemplar program to provide a set of patterns which show people across the public sector and more widely that this kind of stuff can be done. It's not that scary. I mean, business change is always scary, but this kind of business change, it's no scarier than the current kind of business change. And let's face it, no organisation in the current climate can not do business change because we have no money.
Excellent. I'd like to maybe open it up to you now for any questions that you may have for the panel. You'll find my colleague Ian at the back in the blue shirt and the glasses has a microphone. So if you do have a question, just raise your hand, and if you're given the mic, just introduce who you are, the organisation you represent. Obviously, your question. If it's for a specific panel member, then feel free to direct it to an individual. Or if it's more broadly for the panel, just indicate that it's broadly for the panel. So open up the floor for any questions that you may have.
While we're waiting, can I just point something out? That
Of course.
this isn't just about an veneer layered over the top of existing processes and services. Part of it that's absolutely critical is about end-to-end process redesign at the same time. And I think one of the approaches that we've seen at GDS of constantly reiterating and trying things, and as you said, Ed, potentially failing quickly to learn how to change things is really important as well. So it is very much about cultural and process change just as much as the technology, maybe more.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fundamental difference. I think, veneer, I've also had someone's used the word tinsel in the past. It is about changing everything. It is about that whole process shift, that whole process change. And, the fundamental rule I always say to people I work with is, fail fast, fail early, fail cheap, never fail the same way twice.
Like that. So we have a first question.
Yes, I think this is mainly for Geoff Connell, because I'm particularly interested in the diverse background that you have in Newham. Switching to digital delivery, what kind of check did you have? Were there people who just disappeared because they gave up? Did you check whether that happened? And if so, how was it dealt with? In other words, people who just couldn't cope with using digital services.
Yeah, so the thing for us is we have a population that we have to serve. Some of those will be capable of going online, some will be capable and willing, and some won't be capable, and we have to cope with all those. So when I say digital by default, that's our official position, is that you have to go online. And actually we've had a lot of people have got their relatives to help them and things like that, which we hoped would happen. And also the community helping itself rather than just it being us doing it for them. But fundamentally, there's always a back door. There's always a way to help those that can't help themselves. So, if there are disabilities, for example, then we will always support those people with face-to-face. And my view is, if you can take the large majority of the transactions and get them delivered much cheaper, then actually you free up that resource, that lessening resource that we've got for those that really, really do need, the higher level of support. You start to look at the troubled families agenda and that kind of thing. And that's a whole different area, actually, in terms of use of technology and how we can improve things. So it isn't one size fits all, but if we can look after the majority, then that's really what we need to do.
Thank you.
We have the same with the RPA as well, with our customer base. It's similar, but not quite. That we call it digital assistance. How can we provide that digital assistance to our communities? We have a lot of farmers, as I said, that aren't on the internet and actually have never seen a computer before. So we've been working with a lot of the hard-to-reach groups and working with the industry as well, with the National Farming Union, to work with them to help them deliver the services better, but also empowering some of the agents that we deal with, because some of our claims go through an agents, they process those, working with them to work with the farmers. And so you have this big ecosystem of actually people that can provide it, also utilising some of the offers that central government and GDS are providing at the moment of cheap computers for people, where can you reuse the £70 computer with a broadband package, getting them engaged with the communities that are helping with digital assistance as well. So we're trying all the avenues, but as Geoff said as well, you still need the back doors. That do we publicise them? Do we still want paper forms coming in? No, of course we don't. We want to drive the digital take-up, because our cost per claim then dramatically reduces down.
And can I just add that we have a number of people in Newham who don't have a broadband connection. They can't get a leased line, or they can't afford it. Yeah. Therefore, they don't have traditional home computing. But what we found is a lot of those people use mobile devices. Yeah. So phones or tablets in free Wi-Fi zones and those kind of things. So that was a higher level of take-up than we expected, around 25% straight off.
Excellent. Any other questions from the audience? We have one at the back there, Ian.
Thank you. Microsoft might not like me asking this question, but why is government so wedded to using Microsoft operating systems? Why don't we spend the money on using open source operating systems and word processing and things like that? They're just as good as many of the Microsoft systems. And in today's communications world, as you've already said, we use phones to communicate. So why don't we use open source software?
Over to you guys.
Okay.
Great question.
Okay. So in terms of open source, the government has open source policy. The open source policy makes it clear that open source is a valid route for service delivery. We ourselves in GDS, we not only develop on open source platforms, we actually open source our code as well. It's all available on GitHub. In terms of other open source software, then we run things like LibreOffice and stuff in the office. The key point here is that there should be no barriers to the uptake of open source. And if open source is the appropriate solution to your business need, then go for it. I think we should be really clear that the world of perhaps 5-10 years ago, when the kind of like default assumption was we'll buy some expensive COTS kind of solution, that's long gone. We are now in a world where our focus is very much on how do we reuse the assets which we've got, how do we find ways of driving down cost. And obviously open source is a core component of that approach.
Geoff and Ed, you're involved in delivering technology on the ground. I'd be interested in your views on how you select technology and how you decide whether open source is appropriate or not for particular projects.
I think my starting point has been actually that shared source is more important than open source. So it's about whether you can create something that's reusable. If we've got 400 local authorities all doing the same thing, creating something once that's really good and reusing that probably has more financial savings than the shared source solution. However, increasingly as things become software as a service, well, who cares what's behind the scenes? If it works, the user interface is good, that's what matters. So I'm not too hung up on it, to be honest.
And from our perspective, I'll put a slightly different spin on it. We've got to start looking at crowdsourcing. The more people that start using this, the cheaper it's going to become. So it's all about total cost of ownership and supportability. I don't want it, a few men and a dog supporting a piece of software. I'm IL3 certified, my data center. Got to make sure everything is secure. Need lots more people to be using it to drive down that total cost of ownership, that I've got supportability, so if it breaks, I know it's going to be fixed, that my business is not going to be brought down to its knees. So, is it safe for me to move to that yet? We're looking at it, we're investigating the options, we're looking at the price points. As soon as that becomes viable and more people are using it, then yes, definitely we're going to be going down that route. But I think we're all sat there at the moment waiting for it to happen, aren't we?
It's TCO, as you say, that's the bottom line.
And we've got to get onto the bandwagon together to look at it from UK government's perspective and follow GDS's lead to embrace this rather than being frightened about it.
So just to pick up on that last point, so the services, the systems which we're currently building, which range from IL0 up to and including IL3, they are all built around open source solutions.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? I guess, Mark, picking up one of your earlier sound bites was "there is no money" was how you finished one of your previous statements. I'm wondering, is that in many ways what's creating the dynamic for change at the moment? It's the classic necessity is the mother of invention. Is that actually almost in a perverse way creating a positive environment to drive change?
Yeah, I mean, it's change always has to be driven by something. There always has to be either a pull or a push. And if we're in a situation where money was no object, then why would we change? Because money is no object. But we're not in that situation. Money is a kind of key driver. It's one of the core components of how we deliver stuff. And indeed, yes, I mean, we've got kind of two roles. We've got the kind of, I suppose, the nice role and the tough role, because as well as helping departments, we also run the controls process, the spending controls process, which is basically about saying no to departments, because it is a controls process. It's about saying no. But what we try and say when we say no is no, but here's a different way of thinking it, it's a different way of approaching it, a different way of doing it. And the points which colleagues have made about it's much better if we can kind of congregate around things. It's much better if we can drive down the aggregate cost. It's much better if we can share the experience. Is really important. And actually one of the things which I've noticed over the past kind of 3-4 years has been there's been a real shift of behaviour, I think driven by the fact that we have no money, which I think, some of the changes we're seeing, in local government and elsewhere, I think they would have been much more difficult to achieve if there hadn't been the kind of, the drive for change, which is we have no money.
And I guess in the local government environment, cuts have been particularly tough there, Geoff.
Yeah, I think the key for us is we're involved in the business of enabling change using technology. And if you just can't afford to keep doing what you've done in the past, you have to change. And that's why, it is a good time to be doing what we're doing in many ways, because everybody's up for change, because they simply have no choice. And some of the sharing of services, well, people would rather not. It's easier to just keep doing what you've always done. So, that's positive. Where I think our main challenge is, in some respects, is that we have to reduce our own costs, so our capacity to support change is generally going down at a time when the organisations are demanding more support than ever to enable change. There are more balls in the air than ever before. That's something that concerns me, I have to say.
And Ed, in your organisation, not only do you have those challenges, but significant policy changing going on at the same time. How do you manage that sort of cost-cutting environment and the significant policy shifts and EU policy shifts, not just UK government shifts?
That's right. We've got the new Common Agricultural Policy reform coming through in the next, which we should be going live with our new systems in a year and a half's time. So this has given us the ability to look at what we do and how we do it, because we actually make the payments for Natural England, Forestry Commission and the Rural Development teams as well. So they're called the Pillar 2 organisations, so they do all the agri, social, economic schemes, and we do the basic payment scheme. And this now gives us the opportunity to look at how we deliver things. So from a technology enablement perspective, why don't we have one system? Hey, that sounds like a really good idea. To deliver all of these payments to our customers. The customer benefits because they now start dealing with us as one body. They don't care who we are, whether we're a Rural Payments Agency, Natural England Forestry Commission. They just see us as they contact us once with an update payment details, rather than having to contact us 25 different times across 4 different organisations. So it's simplification on that side. But actually, have we got less money? Yes, we have. But if I was in the private sector, I'd be saying I have a lot of money, if I wish I had this budget. And now this gives us an opportunity. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've done the low-hanging fruit. Now we have to take that opportunity to look at the fundamental changes that's always been in the hard-to-do pile. And now we've got to pick those up and start addressing those. And we have to look at shared services, consolidation of services as well. So if we have a customer registration process, why do it 25 different times? Let's do it once and capture the right information, because then the information will be driven, that will drive all our systems, and we'll have the right stuff in the right place to make the right decisions. And we've got to look at how we have an evidence base, so looking at our statistics, how we drive those through, but also, taking this opportunity to change rather than avoiding it because it's hard to do pile.
I think Ed makes a good point about the customer experience there. Interacting with multiple government agencies at local and central government level is not an easy thing. You need to be pretty expert at this. But we have the opportunity using technology to take away a lot of those barriers. 2-tier government in local areas with districts and counties, you know, who knows where to go for different things. I mean, I think my favourite transaction is if there's a dead dog on the road, who would you go to? Is it the county or the district? And the answer is it depends how big the dog is. So with an electronic transaction, you take your photo with your smartphone, it whips it back into somewhere, and it works it out for you. All you know is it's going to get done, here's how long it will take, and you get some feedback that says it happened. And I think that's a big opportunity for us to standardise, to join up our services, central to local. And I'm looking very much at the online authentication registration solution that GDS are creating, because that, for me, has an opportunity to really join up the services that we provide to give better services.
Excellent. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, there's one at the front here. Ian.
Yeah, it's good if you can alternate between front and back, because that way you can run.
And Ian, next is this gentleman here.
Yeah, hi there. A lot of your the process you're talking about sort of touch on a lot of the SME agenda as well. And I was just wondering how the behaviours internally are being changed to actually look at SMEs early on, rather than going down this procurement processes and going to the usual customers you'd usually go to, and rather than changing your internal view of saying, look, let's see what's out there in the market and see what SMEs can deliver.
Yeah, there's two things on that. The first one is working with my I won't call them legacy suppliers, but my big contracts of now moving towards the SME market, and we've embraced that. You know, we've utilised the sprint framework for some of the new cap reform stuff that we're doing, but also on our day-to-day work, we've been engaging with the SME market of using the G-Cloud framework so we can get people on quickly. We know what we want to do, we know how we want to do it, we can engage with a pre-vetted list of people that we know that we've got the best possible prices. Some of my old contracts, I'm still paying tenfold for something, but I can now buy it on the G-Cloud and SME 10 times cheaper. Better value for money for us, but also for the taxpayer as well. So we've embraced this agenda of tapping into this client and this supplier base that was previously unavailable to us because they couldn't afford to bid for some of these big contracts. We've had some real successes with some of the suppliers that we're engaging with, being fast, being nimble. We've implemented a complaints and appeals system from start to finish in 6 weeks, just totally unheard of in our environment. I'd normally be looking at a 12-month cycle from procurement to build to deployment, and it's just enabled us to be fleet of foot.
Geoff, maybe your experiences?
Yeah, I'm working across London to try and standardise our approaches to the use of technology to drive down costs. And that's a bit of a challenge because sometimes it means you tend to go to the larger organisations and they get even larger and you get monopolies or duopolies. And I think we recognise that some of that model is broken actually. We need to support innovative new players into the marketplace. And I think software as a service has a great opportunity for us to drive down the price point of change to new application systems and the way we consume them. So one of the things that we're planning to do, and we have started doing, is really being supportive for those disruptive new players in the marketplace. I think it's a very important agenda.
I guess, Mark, GDS have a role in this too, in terms of the likes of exemplar projects. I would imagine you have limited bandwidth in terms of the service you can provide. So how would you advise the audience in terms of how they should reach out to the private sector?
So the fundamental rule or fundamental approach which we always use ourselves is one of disaggregation, which is to break down what you need into component parts, because once you start doing that, then it becomes much easier to identify those things which are commodity. You just go, that's commodity, I'll just buy that, G-Cloud, whatever. And then you can start identifying those things where there's, you want innovation, you want agility, you want people to bring ideas into the space. And it also makes it much easier to engage with the market because you're not going out the door with some huge, vast thing. So looking across the Exemplar program, we're working with a wide range of suppliers, but it's fair to say that the bulk of them are SMEs. And the core driver for that is the need for business agility. I was, at the moment, we need to be able to deliver things rapidly. We need to be able to deliver things in weeks in terms of timescales, in terms of the business challenges we face. We can't afford the old model where if you're really, really, really lucky, you might get 2 releases a year, and that's part of the reason why, we have clear targets about SME engagement. We strongly support the SME agenda, and we regard kind of SMEs as being one of the kind of cornerstones of how we work. And so how do we persuade organisations about how to do this? As I say, we challenge them about their procurement approach. Through the spend controls process, through our continuous engagement with organisations, we say, why do you want to do it this way? Because if you disaggregate it, then you're going to get much better bang for buck.
Thank you, Mark. So a question at the front.
I wanted to ask you about, you all talked about digital by default. What are you actually looking on for emerging technologies, horizon scanning? So are you staying one step ahead, like Facebook, apps, that kind of stuff?
I'll actually maybe hand it over to Mark, first of all.
Thank you.
I thought you might thank me for that.
I knew I shouldn't have put innovation in my job title. So how do we stay ahead? It's a really interesting question because the world of technology, the world of consumption changes incredibly rapidly. So, Geoff was talking about mobile, and 25% from start off. If I look at e-petitions, which is one of the systems which I built, we're now over 50% mobile for that. So the fundamental challenge really is, again, it's back to disaggregation. It's about being clear what you're trying to achieve. What's the user need? Because everything we build as responsive design, responsive technology, so that it works the same, it works as well, it works well, regardless of the platform, whether you're consuming it on a tablet, on a PC, or on a mobile. That agnosticism, I think, is really important. That kind of, building for the user, not for the device, I think is absolutely critical. But it's also being really clear what you're trying to achieve. So there are some times where you want to kind of, building a Facebook app is exactly the right thing because that's the user need, that's where the users are, that's what you're trying to achieve. There are other times when actually it's an exercise in vanity, and again, for us, it comes back to we need to be really clear who we're working with, what they want to use, how they want to use it, how they want to engage with us, because those are the kind of critical points. So how do we keep in touch with what's going on? Well, I spend a lot of time hanging around Shoreditch, but no, we spend a lot of time talking to people. We spend a lot of time talking to people, ranging from, the big players like Microsoft about stuff which they're doing, through to new startups and the rest of it, to try and understand what's going to come in and what's going to disrupt it. The key, so who can remember when the iPad was launched? 4 years ago, okay? Look at what that has done to the market. Look at how that has transformed the way in which we consume things. The concept of dual screening. You have your TV and you have your iPad. I no longer, not that I ever did, but I don't watch the Eurovision Song Contest. I consume the Eurovision Song Contest on Twitter, on my iPad, or my Surface device, or there are other tablet devices available from other suppliers. But the critical point about it is it's not about the technology. Technology is lovely. Technology is shiny. The reason we're in this business is because we like shiny baubles. I love shiny baubles. I love technology. I've got more technology in my bag than NASA had to send a man to the moon. My bag will be going to the moon shortly. But to be honest, that's the easy bit. That's the kind of simple bit. What we're really about is people and what people actually need.
And I guess, Geoff and Ed, in the diverse user communities that you have, how do you find that balance of, keeping ahead but not getting so far ahead that you leave your user community behind you?
It is a difficult challenge because there isn't a lot of money to build these things. and we're trying to get the cost down. So one of the main things for me is working with different organisations to share innovation, share knowledge. So for me, it will be having a group of authorities working on something together. So it may well be one authority, City of London is one that we're working with, and I think that's quite a good example because they focus much more on delivery to business, whereas we focus much more on delivery to citizens. So we can do things which are innovative that they can use, which they might not invest in themselves, and vice versa. So there are 400 authorities, as I said earlier. We're all doing broadly the same things. So the main thing for me is looking at what others have done, how we can reuse it. And I think a great example is an app called Lewisham, which we've now got a Love Newham version of, which was really about, as I mentioned earlier, the smartphone, take a picture of something, it puts a geotag on it, and it does full end-to-end processing. And if 50 customers have told you about the dead dog, then it gets it cleared up once and tells all 50. It's a lovely process, and it sticks it online to tell you it's happened. That came from one authority, and another authority not being too proud to say not invented here. It's actually a cloud app now. It's on some Microsoft technologies as it happens, so I'm allowed to mention that one, I guess.
Absolutely.
But it is a challenge because these things are often too slow to change and too expensive. So for me, it's about looking elsewhere and borrowing from others.
Yeah. And sort of innovation, I mean, who would have thought that we would have a cloud-based system to allow us in real time to monitor dead dog removal? People, this is the 21st century. We are living in it.
It's not just dogs, you know, it's cats and other things as well.
And of course,
That's a separate
cows as well.
application.
There are cows as well, Ed.
But, you know, it's one of those things. We all do innovation. We all do a bit of innovation. You know, actually, I want to stop doing that because these guys do the innovation. They've brought in these tools and techniques that I've never seen before. And I know I've been working with some of the big consultancies. I moved into the back into the public sector a couple of years ago. And these guys are bringing techniques, enabling us to deliver on any device at any time that the testing regimes I've never seen the likes of. You know, so why are we all doing innovation? These guys are the guys that bring the innovation to us now because they're looking at the best bits that we're all doing and going to pull it together so that we can just re-deliver the service. Once we get this reusable catalogue of information that we can say, I want one of those widgets, and it's been done 10 times before, we know it's tried and tested, and we can implement it in 0 time. So actually, do we want to continually be doing innovation individually? I'd say no. I think that we look to the people that can do that are engaging with the technology companies in Silicon Valley, in wherever, in Reading even, that we are getting that information brought to us so we don't have to sit there thumbing through Computer Weekly looking for the latest widget.
And I think the key point for me there is that business innovation has to come from the business.
Yes.
RPA are the people, Newham are the people who will drive innovation in their area. But in terms of technology innovation, in terms of service innovation, in terms of widget innovation, in terms of extending dead dog removal services to incorporate cats, then you know there's other ways in which we can pull that together.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's interesting is the open data agenda. So looking at how people might develop apps for themselves around the information that we can provide. I think to a degree somewhat unproven still. Apart from the asbometer that will tell you that Newham is the most dangerous place around to have your mobile phone open on the streets. So maybe that's the first thing it tells you, put it back in your pocket. Yep. But no, seriously, the crowdsourcing you heard about earlier, getting people to innovate for themselves and maybe looking at some of those things as the test beds and the prototypes that if they really work, we can help to support.
So we're just a couple of minutes over. Maybe just ask the panelists just to give us a Twitter-sized summary in terms of what they see as the sort of key success factor in this business transformation.
Okay, I'll kick off then. First one for me is engage with our customers and our people, communicate, as I mentioned before, and enable. So enable people to have that ability.
Excellent. Geoff?
One for me that I haven't mentioned is the big uptake we got was when we promoted specific transactions. So we'll come and pick up your Christmas tree after Christmas if you sign up to our online portal. It was specific transactions that drove the shift in activity and take-up.
Excellent. Mark?
Twitter length, okay. Anti-disestablishmentarian, no. Users. Users.
Very good.
And the critical point about that is remember the people inside the organisation are users as well.
Excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for contributing to the discussion today. Big thank you to our panelists. We'll actually publish a summary of this on our government blog on the Microsoft UK website in the next few days. Myself and colleagues will be on the Understanding Our World Hub for the rest of the afternoon, so if there's anything that you didn't get a chance to ask, feel free to come and have a conversation with us. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.